If anyone asks, you're the maid. The what? The maid, Jun Seo Kim replied. Just for the weekend. Jasmine Cole stared at her husband. For a moment she thought she had heard him wrong. The words hung in the air, heavy, cold, and unbelievable. Jasmine slowly put down the coffee mug she was holding. You want me to pretend to be your maid? Please don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult, she repeated. You're asking your wife to hide who she is. Jun Seo sighed impatiently. You don't understand. No, I think I understand perfectly. Understand this, he said. The people attending this gathering are important. These investors expect a certain image. Jasmine felt her chest tighten. A certain image? Yes. And I don't fit it? His silence answered her question. The answer hurt more than any words ever could. Jasmine laughed softly. Not because anything was funny, but because if she didn't laugh, she might cry. You know what's sad? She whispered. A stranger has never made me feel ashamed of being myself. Only my husband has. If you've ever loved someone who slowly stopped appreciating your worth, comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming. Jun Seo looked away. It's only 2 days. No, Jasmine replied. This started years ago. Her voice was calm. The kind of calm that comes after years of disappointment. Because the truth was, this wasn't the first time Jun Seo had made her feel like she wasn't enough. Back before the wealth. Back before the luxury penthouse. Back before the expensive suits and elite business circles. Back to when Jun Seo Kim was just an ambitious young entrepreneur with more dreams than money. And Jasmine Cole was the woman who believed in him. The first time they met, neither of them was looking for love. Jasmine was attending an international business conference in Seoul. She had traveled from South Africa as part of a startup development program. Confident, intelligent, and passionate. She stood out everywhere she went. Not because she tried to, but because she carried herself with a quiet confidence that naturally attracted attention. Jun Seo noticed her during a networking event. She was standing near a presentation board, discussing emerging markets. Most people were politely listening. Jasmine was challenging the speaker, respectfully, but fearlessly. The speaker made a claim about African business growth. Jasmine immediately corrected him. Using facts, data, and experience. The room fell silent. Then several people started taking notes. Jun Seo couldn't stop smiling. After the presentation ended, he walked over. You embarrassed him. Jasmine laughed. I corrected him. He looked embarrassed. That's not my fault. Their eyes met. And for the first time, Jun Seo found himself speechless. Over the next few days, they kept running into each other. Coffee became lunch. Lunch became dinner. Dinner became long conversations. The more he learned about Jasmine, the more impressed he became. She wasn't only intelligent, she was kind. She volunteered. She mentored young entrepreneurs. She believed success meant helping other people succeed too. Jun Seo had never met anyone like her. One evening, while walking beside the Han River, he finally asked the question, Would you ever date a Korean man? Jasmine laughed. Is that your way of asking me out? Maybe. Then maybe I'd say yes. 3 years later, they got married. And for a while, life was beautiful. They weren't rich. Far from it. Jun Seo's startup struggled constantly. Investors rejected him. Banks refused loans. Employees quit. Some months he could barely pay office rent. There were nights when he sat at the dining table, staring at unpaid bills, wondering if he should give up. Every time Jasmine sat beside him, You're going to succeed. How do you know? Because I've never met anyone more stubborn than you. I might fail, then fail. He looked surprised. She smiled. Then get up and try again. Those words became his fuel. What nobody knew was how much Jasmine sacrificed during those years. When the company nearly collapsed, she invested most of her personal savings. When payroll was short, she quietly covered expenses. When investors rejected Junseo, she helped rewrite presentations. When clients hesitated, she helped secure meetings. She became his biggest supporter, his advisor, his partner, MAID, his wife. And slowly, the company began growing. Until one day, the contracts became bigger, the offices became larger, the profits multiplied. For the first time in his life, Junseo had money, real money, the kind of money that opened doors. And unfortunately, some of those doors led him to people who cared more about appearances than character. At first, Jasmine barely noticed the change. The warning signs were small, almost invisible. At business dinners, Junseo introduced her less often. At networking events, he sometimes left her standing alone. When people asked personal questions, he seemed uncomfortable discussing their relationship. Jasmine tried to ignore it. Everyone changes under pressure. At least, that's what she told herself. One evening, everything became harder to ignore. A wealthy executive invited them to a private dinner. As guests introduced themselves, the executive looked at Jasmine. "Your wife is beautiful." "Thank you," Junseo replied. "Where is she from?" The room grew quiet. Jasmine waited. The answer should have been simple. South Africa. Instead, Junseo hesitated. For several uncomfortable seconds. Jasmine noticed. And so did everyone else. Eventually, he answered. "It's a long story." The executive laughed and moved on. But Jasmine never forgot that moment, because she realized her husband wasn't embarrassed by the question. He was embarrassed by the answer. If you're enjoying the story so far, take a second to like the video. It helps more people discover stories like this and supports the channel. The years continued. Junseo became richer, more influential, more respected, and strangely, more distant. The man who once admired Jasmine's confidence now asked her to stay quiet during certain meetings. The man who once bragged about her intelligence now avoided mentioning her accomplishments. The man who once held her hand proudly in public now seemed concerned about what other people thought. Yet Jasmine stayed, not because she was weak, because she loved him. Because she remembered the man he used to be. Because she believed that version of him still existed somewhere beneath the ambition. Then came the invitation. An exclusive weekend gathering hosted by Minjae Park. Junseo's oldest friend, a billionaire, a respected investor, and one of the most influential businessmen in Korea. The guest list included executives, celebrities, politicians, and international investors. Everyone important would be there. The moment Junseo received the invitation, something changed. He became nervous, obsessed, determined to impress everyone attending. Then 3 days before the event, he finally made the request that shattered Jasmine's heart. "If anyone asks," he said quietly, "you're the maid." And now, standing in their luxury apartment, Jasmine realized something painful. This wasn't a sudden decision. This wasn't a moment of bad judgment. This was the destination. Every small embarrassment, every awkward introduction, every uncomfortable silence, every time he failed to defend her, every moment had led here. To the day her husband decided another woman was worthy of standing beside him. And she wasn't. Jasmine looked into his eyes, the eyes she once trusted completely. "Tell me honestly." Junseo swallowed. "What? Are you ashamed of me?" For the first time since the conversation started, he couldn't answer. And that silence told her everything she needed to know. What Jasmine didn't realize was that this weekend would change all 3 of their lives forever. Because somewhere in the mountains, Minjae Park was preparing to welcome his guests. And before the weekend ended, he would meet the woman Junseo was trying so desperately to hide. The woman he would soon find impossible to forget. The drive to Minjae Park's mountain estate was quiet. Too quiet. Jun Seo spent most of the trip checking emails and reviewing investor profiles. Jasmine stared out the window, watching forests pass by, watching mountains rise in the distance, watching 6 years of marriage feel strangely unfamiliar. Neither of them spoke about the argument again. Neither needed to. The silence said everything. By the time they arrived, luxury vehicles already lined the massive driveway. Security guards stood near the entrance. Valets rushed between cars. Executives, celebrities, and investors filled the estate with laughter and conversation. The place looked more like a royal retreat than a private residence. Jasmine stepped out carrying a small bag. Not as a guest, not as a wife, as a maid. Jun Seo adjusted his suit. Remember the plan. Jasmine looked at him. For a second she hoped he would change his mind. Apologize. Tell the truth. Instead he walked ahead. Without another word. Something inside her finally went numb. At the entrance, a tall man greeted arriving guests. Min Jae Park. Confident, warm, effortlessly charismatic. The kind of man who made people feel welcome within seconds. The moment he saw Jun Seo, his face lit up. Jun Seo! The two men embraced. It has been too long. Far too long. Then Min Jae's attention shifted toward Jasmine. Who's this? Before Jasmine could answer, Jun Seo spoke. Our maid. For a brief moment, confusion flashed across Min Jae's face. He looked at Jasmine, then back at Jun Seo. Something about the situation felt strange, but he simply smiled. Welcome. Unlike everyone else, he looked directly at her while speaking. Jasmine noticed immediately. Thank you, she replied. It was a small gesture, yet after everything that had happened, it felt surprisingly meaningful. The first evening passed quickly. Guests mingled, champagne flowed. Business discussions filled every corner of the estate. Jasmine quietly helped staff coordinate preparations for dinner. Several workers assumed she had years of hospitality experience. The truth was simpler. Jasmine was naturally organized, naturally calm, naturally capable. Qualities that often went unnoticed until a crisis appeared. And a crisis appeared sooner than expected. Halfway through dinner, an argument erupted between two major investors. One accused the other of withholding information during negotiations. They started raising their voices. Tempers flared. Several guests looked uncomfortable. The atmosphere became tense. Jun Seo watched nervously. The deal involved millions. If it collapsed, the entire weekend could unravel. Then Jasmine quietly approached. Excuse me, she said gently. The men barely acknowledged her. She remained calm. She asked them a few questions, listened carefully. Within 15 minutes, she identified the misunderstanding. One document had been interpreted incorrectly. The conflict disappeared almost immediately. The investors shook hands. The deal survived. The room relaxed. And Jasmine returned to her duties without expecting recognition. But someone had been watching. Min Jae. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had just seen. Most people with power wanted credit. Most people wanted attention. This woman seemed different. She solved problems and disappeared. Interesting. Very interesting. The next morning, curiosity pulled him toward her. He found Jasmine helping staff reorganize seating arrangements. You saved my dinner last night. Jasmine smiled politely. I just helped clarify things. You did more than that. It wasn't a big deal. Min Jae laughed. Everyone keeps saying that after you solve their problems. For the first time, Jasmine genuinely smiled. And for a brief second, Min Jae forgot what he was about to say. She was beautiful. Even without expensive jewelry or designer clothes. But because there was a kindness in her smile that felt genuine. Rare and refreshing. What's your name? Jasmine. Jasmine. He repeated it slowly, as though committing it to memory. Something about that made her unexpectedly nervous. Meanwhile, inside the estate, Jun Seo noticed their conversation, and for reasons he couldn't explain, it irritated him.